Staten Island couple got into a contentious argument at their Dongan Hills apartment on March the 10th of 2016. As tensions escalated, 23-year-old Jeffrey McDonald unloaded a fury of punches to his girlfriend's face and body. As was subsequently determined by the county medical examiner, McDonald struck 23-year-old Elisa Johnson with such force that he actually severed a vertebral artery in her neck. Despite the young woman being in obviously critical condition, the man left her at the apartment. He dialed 911 and emergency crews were sent to the scene, but Johnson ultimately died at the hospital, with the official cause of death later being ruled as blunt force trauma. In the aftermath, McDonald was indicted on 2 counts of manslaughter, 1 in the first degree and 1 in the second degree. He agreed to a plea deal which led to the first degree charge being dropped and him receiving a prison term of 4 to 12 years. During his 2017 sentencing hearing, McDonald issued an apology to Johnson's family, but the presiding judge later indicated that he didn't see an ounce of sorrow in the statement he made. The judge then punctuated the proceedings with a stern admonishment of McDonald's actions, saying, "You battered a defenseless woman who weighed 107 pounds. That makes you pretty low. In my book, that makes you a coward." Number 6. Peter Nowacek. In December of 2021, Vancouver women Jamie Coots and Genevieve Thomas were at the Coyote Lounge Bar in the Mexican resort city of Playa del Carmen. Another woman they were with was being badgered by a man even after she said she wasn't interested multiple times. Eventually, Coots and Thomas stepped in on the woman's behalf, and the man initially relented his incessant pestering. However, he quickly turned around and charged the group of women, striking Thomas square in the jaw. The force of the punch was great enough to send her falling backwards, causing her to hit her head on something and briefly lose consciousness. The assailant then zeroed in on Coots, whom he punched in the face, breaking her nose and knocking out one of her teeth. Good Samaritans subsequently brought Coots and Thomas to the hospital. The women's attacker, who was identified as a professional boxer from Ontario named Peter Nowacek, was detained by police. According to the Quintana Roo Attorney General's office, Nowacek was charged with attempted murder in the wake of the incident. Number 5. Raymond Jury. In the early hours of January the 30th of 2019, a member of the rogue chapter of the New Zealand prison gang known as the Mongrel Mob was mercilessly beaten to death by a man he once considered a brother. As was detailed in the High Court of Rotorua, 58-year-old Raymond Jury, a fellow Mongrel Mob member, went to Trevor Rikihana's residence, where he violently beat, kicked, and strangled the homeowner following a heated argument about money. Rikihana reportedly begged for Jury to spare his life, but his pleas were pitilessly ignored by his hulking assailant. The victim survived for up to 35 minutes after the final blow was delivered, after which he succumbed to his injuries. Rikihana's niece, Lauren Eketone, reported hearing her uncle pleading for his life, followed by a barrage of stomps and kicks. Eketone subsequently fled the semi-rural Ohata property with her son, believing their lives to be in danger as well. Presiding Judge Paul Davison described Jury's ferocious attack as cruel, callous, and extremely violent. The justice went on to label the man's actions as cowardly, stating he'd used his superior size and strength to overpower an individual completely unable to defend himself. Following the announcement of Jury's punishment, life imprisonment, the public gallery erupted into chaos, with many of the defendants' family members and supporters hurling insults at the judge. Number 4. Isaac White Carter. On November the 12th of 2022, 19-year-old Bianca Palomero was working at the Habit Burger Grill in Antioch, California, when she noticed a group of men bullying a colleague's special needs brother. The young woman intervened on the boy's behalf, at which point the men shifted their aggression towards her. Shocking CCTV footage showed one of the suspects deliver a vicious blow to Palomero's face, sparking a brawl that came to involve multiple other customers. Another Habit Burger Grill employee eventually pulled Palomero away from her attacker, who continued shouting and knocked a potted plant off the countertop. The man and his 3 acquaintances subsequently left the store and sped away from the scene in a silver BMW. Although Palomero was rushed to the hospital, it wasn't in time for doctors to preserve her right eye, which had been critically damaged by the assailant's barrage of punches. Following a weeks-long manhunt, local authorities tracked down the suspect, identified as 20-year-old Isaac White Carter. The latter was taken into custody on felony charges of mayhem and aggravated assault causing great bodily injury. White Carter appeared in Contra Costa County Superior Court in early December of 2022. A GoFundMe campaign was launched in support of Palmyra's recovery efforts. As of the latest updates, the page had raised over $130,000 to help cover the young woman's medical bills. Number 3. Gavin Lewis. East London woman Sandra Samuels was murdered by a man with a history of violence against women in September of 2019, as was heard during proceedings at the Old Bailey. The 44-year-old had allowed vagabond Gavin Lewis to stay at her Stoke Newington flat. It was a decision born of sheer kindness, but which ultimately proved fatal for Samuels. 41-year-old Lewis overpowered the small and slight woman, unleashing a vicious attack despite her offering him shelter and food. When the 19-minute assault finally came to an end, the man locked the front door to the flat and left the scene, where Samuel's lifeless body remained until police found her 2 days later. While Lewis awaited punishment for Samuel's murder, the prosecution provided details regarding his previous instances of unprovoked violence against women. Back in 2010, he'd allegedly punched a woman inside her East London apartment and struck her over the head with a wine bottle. 2 years later, Lewis was accused of beating his girlfriend at her home in Islington. Judge Nigel Lickley called the defendant a violent man who posed a threat to any woman who found themselves alone with him. For Samuel's killing, Lewis was given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Number 2. Abu Munahim. Shortly after escaping an abusive relationship, 17-year-old mother of one, Eloise McDermott, started seeing a man by the name of Abu Munahim in May of 2021. By December of the following year, Munahim was behind bars for a campaign of abuse and harassment he inflicted upon the vulnerable young woman who was treated worse than a prisoner during the course of their relationship. The sickening details of the couple's tumultuous history came to light during a hearing at Minshull Street Crown Court in Manchester, England. Prosecutors revealed that on one occasion the pair were walking home after a night out with friends when Munahim suddenly started attacking McDermott for something she'd said earlier. He punched her in the face and ribs and she fell to the pavement, pleading with him to stop. The man, who was almost 10 years McDermott's senior, continued the vicious assault and told her he was going to kill her. Each time the young woman attempted to flee, Munahim would send her back to the ground until eventually she managed to run into the middle of the street and flag down a truck driver. Munahim dragged her back into the bushes as she tried to get into the vehicle, at which point the driver called the police. In another incident, the man beat and strangled McDermott until she passed out. She subsequently checked herself into a hotel because she couldn't bear for her mother to see her black eye and bruised ribs. Munahim didn't leave her alone, however, further threatening to petrol bomb her house and throw acid in her face. For another domestic episode, Munahim was jailed for 7 weeks, but upon his release, he called McDermott to say, "Watch what happens now." He showed up at her house in the middle of the night, openly flouting a non-contact order against him, and even threatened to harm her young child if she didn't do as he asked. The Greater Manchester man was eventually arrested again, and he subsequently pleaded guilty to coercive behavior and assault. The presiding judge described Munahim as a coward with utter contempt for women. He was jailed for 4.5 years and given an indefinite restraining order, precluding him from making any form of contact with McDermott ever again. Number 1. Billy Chememere. In November of 2021, Kenyan man Billy Chememere was brought to trial accused of murdering at least 20 elderly women in North Texas. The man's initial run-in with the law came in 2010 and 2011 when he was convicted of drunk driving, for which he was given short custodial sentences in order to pay fines. In the summer of 2012, Chememere was taken into police custody yet again, this time for assaulting his then-girlfriend. 4 years later, he was arrested for trespassing at Edgemere Retirement Community in Dallas. to which he pleaded no contest. According to testimony given in court, Chemamir would pose as a medical professional or maintenance worker to gain access to older women's homes. Once inside, he'd smother his victims with a pillow before making off with some of their valuables. In March of 2018, Chemamir's pernicious campaign of violence against the elderly of North Texas was brought to an end when 91-year-old Mary Annis Bartell survived his attack. She told the police that a man had broken into her apartment, tried to suffocate her with a pillow, and stolen some jewelry before fleeing the scene. Bartell's assailant was ultimately identified as Chemamir, who was subsequently linked to the murders he'd committed. His first trial ended with a deadlocked jury, resulting in a mistrial. The retrial commenced on April the 25th of 2022. During the court proceedings, family members of several of Chemamir's victims made impact statements. The daughter of slain 81-year-old Miriam Nelson called the accused serial killer a vile coward who preyed on vulnerable, elderly women. As of June of 2022, Chemamir had been indicted on 22 counts of capital murder, although North Texas authorities indicated that his victim count might be higher than originally believed. In October, having been convicted of 2 of the murders, he was sentenced to life in prison, and his remaining charges were subsequently dropped. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have to comfort someone on an airplane who's deathly afraid of flying, or bring a screaming baby with you everywhere you go for a week? Let us know in the comments section below.